Okay, we're going to record this webinar, and the webinar is all about the local electricity bill and energy pricing. And we're going to start this webinar with, we've got three speakers. The first one of those is Dr. Mark Earthy. He's going to talk about electricity markets, and we're going to allow Mark about 20 minutes to run his slides. Then we've got Rupert Meadows, who's going to talk about the electricity bill. We're going to for around a quarter of an hour. And Amy Carnley-Parry from Energy Local. She's going to talk about what Energy Local have been doing. Got around about a quarter of an hour for that. And at the end, we're going to have Q&As. So we'll have around about half an hour for that to finish at 11:30. If you've got any questions, please put those in the chat box so that the speakers can answer those, and we can have a discussion in the chat box and pick those questions up at the end at around about 11 o'clock. So I suggest, my name's Chris Rowland, and I'm one of the directors of Community Energy South. I've stepped in today. Ollie Pendren was going to be the chair, but Ollie's been called up to London. So I'm going to try and chair the meeting. I don't usually do this, so I'm going to do my best today. I'm here with Kelly and Jesse, who are both from Community Energy South as well, and they're managing this meeting too. So thank you very much for coming today. Could we start with Dr. Mark Earthy, please?
Yeah, I shall just share my screen. While I'm doing this, I noticed there are lots of people in the waiting room. I assume we're letting them in, and you want me to start?
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, hi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Mark Earthy from Maitland Energy Consulting. I'll be talking about understanding your energy bills and talking about trends in UK energy prices over the last 4 years, and also touch on Truss's energy support schemes. And the subtitle of this presentation is really "Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud." Right, personally, I'm a Saltdean resident down on the coast, and I'm a local business owner. I have 32 years of experience in UK and European energy markets as a practitioner, consultant, director, and non-executive director. I have been a technical advisor to the European Union and UK energy regulators for my sins. My main speciality is smart grids, climate change, sustainable energy, and applications of artificial intelligence. I actually work in consulting and software. I do a lot of advisory work for local organisations around energy usage and support of community energy schemes. I put my email address on this slide, so feel free to contact me. And everything I say today will be available in the kind of a slide pack you can get from the organisers of this webinar or directly from me. My agenda today, I'm going to talk about energy prices and why we're in this mess. So I'll go back over some history. I'll look at the Ofgem price cap and the various energy bill components to help you understand the various issues. I'll look at the energy support schemes, and then finish off with In Liz We Trust, which is the future for UK energy bills. If that's okay with everybody, I shall move on. So really, I'm going to start by asking why we're in this mess. If you look at UK energy sources back in the distant days of 1991, when deregulation started, we had abundant coal-fired power generation, which is fueled mainly from UK coal fields. We had substantial nuclear generation from UK reactors. We had abundant North Sea natural gas, and we had negligible volumes of renewables and very few green levies. If some of you are older than I am, you may remember the old green ticket, green levies that were done on importing green energy from France, which actually came from their nuclear reactors. But the key point that in 1991 was that UK energy prices were largely set domestically, in fact, actually almost entirely set domestically. If we now move on to 2022, the key point is that UK energy sources are now very, very different. Decarbonisation has removed coal and the older gas-fired power generation power stations from the merit order. Our nuclear generation is slowly winding down as older nuclear stations retire, and we've seen a very, very large increase in renewable or intermittent generation. But the but, and this is a very important but, is we still have a near total reliance on flexible gas generation to stabilise the intermittents. The intermittent generation is all very well and good, but it doesn't run all the time to the quantity that we need. So there has to be a kind of reserve of gas generation, to keep the system supplied with enough energy for consumers. Another key point from the 21st century, as you will see from this graph, is the UK's massively increased reliance on energy imports. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but certainly in the early 90s when deregulation started, we also kind of a net export of energy. But from about 2003 onwards, we are now a very, very significant importer of energy. And that's one of the causes of the kind of mess that we're in. But basically, recent events have shown there is a fundamental design flaw in UK energy market design. Over the last few years, we've moved to an international free market pricing for energy, which now means that UK energy prices are set globally rather than domestically, which are effectively holding us hostage to world events, as we have seen. So seeing this in context over the last couple of years, the post-pandemic recovery boosted our energy demand and the energy demand of the world quite considerably as industry recovered. But the energy infrastructure proved itself quite unable to cope with that increase because it too had been wound down because of the pandemic. And what actually happened was that, as you saw, oil and gas prices soared. But if you recall from my previous slide, gas also sets the price of UK electricity through a mechanism known as marginal pricing. This has resulted in a double whammy for UK energy consumers because if they use gas, they saw a 16-fold increase in gas prices at the higher the price spike. But they've also seen gas prices remain elevated for the next 3 years. So though it's been a spike, you still see it drop down to considerably higher prices over the next 3 years. But at the same time, our electricity prices soared because they were driven higher by gas-fired generation costs. Now, the tragedy is, and this is where I'm afraid I have to get a little bit political, this design flaw has always been known about. Because back in 1991, when people like me were drafted into the energy industry from other markets, we said, if you go down this route and you start linking UK energy prices to world energy and commodities, you will be held hostage to them and they will take you wherever they want to go. And we're generally told to say, oh, that doesn't matter, just simply shut up because there will be certain benefits. The rest, as they say, is history. So I'll then move on to actually look at the Ofgem price cap, which is another contributor to the mess that we're in. Unfortunately, it does have a hideous name that doesn't actually roll off the tongue. So if you don't mind, I'll stick with CAP. But the full name is the Ofgem Dual Fuel Standard Variable Tariff Price Cap. As you say, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, so I'll stick with CAP for now. But the important thing to realise is that the cap was actually introduced for reasons of consumer protection. It protected people who were leaving fixed price tariffs and moving on to the supplier's standard variable tariffs. Right? It actually stopped people from being price gouged by suppliers, because basically what happened is the suppliers would actually set their standard tariffs at rates very much higher than their fixed price tariffs to stop people coming off fixed price contracts. So, and then the regulators looked at this and said, you are price gouging because there are a number of people who are for very good reason are either unwilling or unable to move between fixed price tariffs, and you are not going to price gouge. So how it worked was that the price cap set maximum price limits on suppliers in terms of what they are allowed to charge for gas and electricity. Now, this was set through a maximum unit rate and a maximum daily kind of standing charge. So it wasn't a fixed amount of money, it was a fixed rate. And that distinction is very, very important to bear in mind. So generally, suppliers' fixed price tariffs were lower than the cap. The cap itself was never, ever intended as an alternative tariff for customers to deliberately choose. Business customers were left, of course, completely unprotected because small, medium and large businesses generally negotiate market price contracts with their supplier, which have a highly fixed price element to it. And if they decide to go out of contract, then that's their own responsibility and their own choice. So that's a different issue. Now, the cap itself is based on Ofgem's reasonable assumptions of supply costs in terms of wholesale energy component and non-energy components. So I can show you now a quick chart on how the price cap is actually broken down by component. So on this graph, the kind of charts you normally see when you're describing, say, the Ofgem price cap, and I've used the current one as an example, it's broken down into wholesale costs of energy and the kind of everything else, which is profit margin, VAT, green levies, and running costs. Now on this chart, that little block of VAT, green levies, and running costs actually breaks down to those elements on the right-hand side, that great long list that starts retail price curve and capacity, policy, CFDs, all of that lot is each individual one of those has a cost element. and Ofgem forecasts each individual one and agrees it with the supplier, which when taken as a sum represents part of the price cap that suppliers are allowed to charge. So it is really, really complicated. I don't want to go into it other than say it is complicated. But what you will notice is from the block diagram on the left-hand side is that the wholesale energy cost actually dominates the entire cost part component. So out of the 3,549 total costs for October, 2,500 of that is actually energy. Now that's not always been true. If you look back over the history of the price cap for the last for 2 years, back in the summer of 2020, the energy price was about a third of the cap price, and it kind of stayed fairly static all the way through to the summer of last year, or sorry, the summer of this year, when we started to pull away from the effects of COVID. And as you saw recently for the current cap, it's actually doubled again since the summer. So this is really causing a lot of people a lot of grief, and explains why the Ofgem price cap is kind of simply running away from us. So the consequences of the rise in wholesale energy prices are fairly simple, fairly dramatic to explain. So suppliers put their fixed price tariffs up to exceed the price cap, because obviously they had energy prices running away with them. So their fixed price tariffs had to be fixed to reflect this. So what energy consumers generally did is they looked at the price cap, they looked at the fixed price tariff, realized that the price cap was now a lot lower than the fixed price, and they moved on to it voluntarily. So you now had millions of energy consumers all on the price cap, which was fixed, rather than going on to the old tariff structure, which is rising up in price. As a result of that, suppliers are buying high and selling low and losing absolute fortunes. Suppliers who had originally hedged themselves found that their hedges were expiring and were impossibly expensive to replace. Many of the small suppliers never hedged at all, so they all went bust. And so, as you've seen, there were widespread supplier failures, and the costs of transferring their customers were passed on to us through increasing various components in the price cap. So where we are now is that the Ofgem price cap for next year is around about 6,600. It obviously varies a lot because Ofgem recalculates it every couple of days. But the kind of headline number you'll see at the moment is 6,600, and bearing in mind that right now it's 3,500. That would represent another doubling. So as you can imagine, there was and is a political and consumer firestorm over energy affordability, as this is really the way they want to go forward. Rishi Sunak, if you remember him, offered some financial support back in the summer over the previous price levels. That support package has now been completely overwhelmed. So enter Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng with the various energy support schemes, which is what I'm going to move on to looking at now. I don't want to dwell on this in too much detail because you're probably aware of it. But the key features of the energy support schemes is that for domestic consumers, there'll be an energy price guarantee for the next 2 years that effectively. This design flaw has always been known about, because back in 1991, when people like me were drafted into the energy industry from other markets, we said if you go down this route and you start linking UK energy prices to world energy and commodities, you will be held hostage to them and they will take you wherever they want to go. And we generally told to say, oh, that doesn't matter, just simply shut up, because there will be certain benefits. The rest, as they say, is history. So I'll then move on to actually look at the Ofgem price cap, which is another contributor to the mess that we're in. Unfortunately, it does have a hideous name that doesn't actually roll off the tongue. So if you don't mind, I'll stick with CAP. But the full name is the Ofgem Dual Fuel Standard Variable Tariff Price Cap. As you can say, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, so I'll stick with CAP for now. But the important thing to realise is that the cap was actually introduced for reasons of consumer protection. It protected people who were leaving fixed price tariffs and moving on to the supplier's standard variable tariffs. Right? It actually stopped people from being price gouged by suppliers, because basically what happened is the suppliers would actually set their standard tariffs at rates very much higher than their fixed price tariffs to stop people coming off fixed price contracts. So, and then the regulators looked at this and said, you are price gouging because there are a number of people who are for very good reason are either unwilling or unable to move between fixed price tariffs, and you are not going to price gouge. So how it worked was that the price cap set maximum price limits on suppliers in terms of what they are allowed to charge for gas and electricity. Now, this was set through a maximum unit rate and a maximum daily kind of standing charge. So it wasn't a fixed amount of money, it was a fixed rate. And that distinction is very, very important to bear in mind. So generally, suppliers' fixed price tariffs were lower than the cap. The cap itself was never ever intended as an alternative tariff for customers to deliberately choose. Business customers were left, of course, completely unprotected because small, medium and large businesses generally negotiate market price contracts with their supplier, which have a highly fixed price element to it. And if they decide to go out of contract, then that's their own responsibility and their own choice. So that's a different issue. Now, the cap itself is based on Ofgem's reasonable assumptions of supply costs in terms of wholesale energy component and non-energy component. So I can show you now a quick chart on how the price cap is actually broken down by component. So on this graph, the kind of charts you normally see when you're describing, say, the Ofgem price cap, and I've used the current one as an example, is broken down to wholesale costs of energy and the kind of everything else, which is profit margin, VAT, green levies, and running costs. Now on this chart, that little block of VAT, green levies, and running costs actually breaks down to those elements on the right-hand side, that great long list that starts retail price curve and capacity, policy, CFDs, all of that lot is each individual one of those has a cost element. And Ofgem forecasts each individual one and agrees it with the supplier, which when taken as a sum represents part of the price cap that suppliers are allowed to charge. So it is really, really complicated. I don't want to go into it other than say it is complicated. But what you will notice is from the block diagram on the left-hand side is that the wholesale energy cost actually dominates the entire cost part component. So out of the 3,549 total costs for October, 2,500 of that is actually energy. Now that's not always been true. If you look back over the history of the price cap for the last 2 years, back in the summer of 2020, the energy price was about a third of the cap price, and it kind of stayed fairly static all the way through to the summer of last year, or sorry, the summer of this year, when we started to pull away from the effects of COVID. And as you saw recently for the current cap, it's actually doubled again since the summer. So this is really causing a lot of people a lot of grief and explains why the Ofgem price cap is kind of simply running away from us. So the consequences of the rise in wholesale energy prices are fairly simple, fairly dramatic to explain. So suppliers put their fixed price tariffs up to exceed the price cap because obviously they had energy prices running away with them. So their fixed price tariffs had to be fixed to reflect this. So what energy consumers generally did is they looked at the price cap, they looked at the fixed price tariff, realized that the price cap was now a lot lower than the fixed price, and they moved on to it voluntarily. So you now had millions of energy consumers all on the price cap, which was fixed, rather than going on to the old tariff structure, which is rising up in price. As a result of that, suppliers are buying high and selling low and losing absolute fortunes. Suppliers who had originally hedged themselves found that their hedges were expiring and were impossibly expensive to replace. Many of the small suppliers never hedged at all, so they all went bust. And so, as you've seen, there were widespread supplier failures, and the cost of transferring their customers were passed on to us through increasing various components in the price cap. So where we are now is that the Ofgem price cap for next year is around about 6,600. It obviously varies a lot because Ofgem recalculates it every couple of days. But the kind of headline number you'll see at the moment is 6,600, and bearing in mind that right now it's 3,500. That would represent another doubling. So as you can imagine, there was and is a political and consumer firestorm over energy affordability, as this is really the way they want to go forward. Rishi Sunak, if you remember him, offered some financial support back in the summer over the previous price levels. That support package has now been completely overwhelmed. So enter Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng with the various energy support schemes, which is what I'm going to move on to looking at now. I don't want to dwell on this in too much detail because you're probably aware of it. But the key features of the energy support schemes is that for domestic consumers, there'll be an energy price guarantee for the next 2 years that effectively replaces the Ofgem price cap as seen by consumers. So this will set as a reference level to 2,500, but Sunak's £400 to everybody is still going to be paid along with the agreed means tested benefits. Business, charities and the public sector will be supported at 6 months at an equivalent level, equivalent to the domestic energy price guarantee, where there's going to be a review that starts in a couple of months' time about what the vulnerable sectors are or whether this support is going to carry on. So it is by no means guaranteed that there will be very much support for businesses, charities and the public sector lasting out for much more than 6 months. There will be a temporary suspension of green levies, but how long temporary will be, who knows. Another key point is there will be no further windfall tax on energy producers, and there won't be any repayment obligations on energy consumers. So as far as we can see, the government is going to borrow the money to fund this, and of course taxpayers, that's us, our children and our children's children, will be left to pick up the bill, and this bill will be considerable, running to anything between 120 and 150 billion pounds. Truss is actually going to put in long-term measures to boost energy supply. They're looking at stopping gas and setting the marginal price of electricity. So they are reviewing how the electricity market in the UK actually works. And I'm involved in that. It's not simple, but hopefully we will be able to do something about it. Very controversially, the fracking ban is going to be lifted. And if Truss gets her way and is successful, the UK will be back being a net energy exporter by 2040. However, the critical thing to realise is that the Ofgem price cap hasn't gone away, it's not vanished, it's still been lurking there in the background and will be used in all these calculations. What it will do, it will define the size of the government, in other words, our taxpayers' final bill, because it's the difference between the price cap as calculated by Ofgem and £2,500, which is the money that the government will actually use. So this is it, Liz's EPG in kind of graphical form. I put on here the latest forecast that I had for the Ofgem price cap going through the next year, up to the Q4 2023. So basically you can see the arrow down there using my cursor here. Basically what the energy price guarantee does, it just simply draws a straight line through the next year. So the average energy bill won't be more than 2,500. It will be a bit less depending upon what benefits people are entitled to. So I believe at the moment that everybody's still going to get the £400, which will take it down to 2,100. But there may be other means tested benefits and things coming in as well. I'm being a bit vague on this because as we've seen from the Conservative Party conference with all the U-turns, God knows how many more U-turns there may be applied to this diagram. So I'm giving you this as the situation that I know it as of a couple of days ago. But as I say, our Community Energy South and Invesco can update you with me if we know more. So that's the kind of current situation. So moving on to what people will probably actually pay under this and how to estimate their bills. So I don't know if we have anybody in the audience from Citizen Advice or Bill Advisory Services. But the basic mechanism that you need to do to advise your domestic customers is you find out what their energy consumption is from kind of what kind of house or premises they have. So I've got kind of 3 indicative ones here taken from the Ofgem website. So you've got a single 1-bedroom house or flat will probably use about 9,800 kilowatt hours a year of gas and electricity. Your average 3-bedroom house is about 14,900. And your large 5-bedroom house will be about 22,000 kilowatt hours a year. So basically what you would do is you will take their energy consumption, apply the EPG rates to it, take off any of the benefits the household is entitled to, and that's basically what their bill will be. So down here to help you, I'll put a little kind of formula. So you estimate their gas and electricity kilowatt hour consumption, apply the EPG rate, take off their benefits, and that will be their final energy bill. So I hope that's reasonably clear. Now, businesses is a real pain. This has been shifting around quite radically over the past few days, and leads me to have to kind of caveat this slide, because this slide was correct as about 4 days ago, before the government has threatened to start tinkering around with it. Basically, most business energy bills are some function of electricity baseload prices and electricity peak. So it's a complicated pricing mechanism, and I can't begin to explain it all today. But what I will say is that the Truss's scheme for businesses actually caps the baseload energy component of their bill, and does something similar to the gas price cap. But everything else is up for grabs. So all we can say to help businesses look at their bills is you take your bill, work out how much of your energy is baseload, apply the final rate that the government has set, apply all the demand profile and other uncapped elements that your supplier is going to do, and that will turn out to be, your final bill. I've given you some more guidance in the appendix of these slides. I say I'm not going through the appendix, but they are there for your review when you want to go through them. But I say the business side of this is immensely complicated and literally needs to be done on a case-by-case, business-by-business, case-by-case basis. So if we look at the future for energy price bills under Truss's energy strategy, she's actually using a shotgun approach to energy self-sufficiency. I think the grounds are, if you have a big enough spread of targets, you have a big shotgun, you're bound to hit one of those targets. So she is chasing green and black alternatives simultaneously, and kind of don't we all know it. However, short term, we are all remain held hostage by global gas prices. The new licenses that she wants to issue to fossil fuel producers is a long-term move. Certainly won't have a much effect for the next 2 to 3 years, while those licenses and production capabilities come online. UK fracking itself looks geologically problematic. So although she's going to lift the restrictions, there's probably not much gas to be fracked down there. Green projects, of course, are in limbo while all the green levies are sorted out, because obviously those who are relying on green levies, which have been suspended, are of course in limbo. So goodness knows what's going to happen to them. There are also questions around whether or not she's going to accelerate renewables such as onshore wind, solar, and battery storage. A lot of our problems will be solved if we remove the restrictions on onshore wind and moved over to more battery storage. But the Conservative Party seems to be dead against that still. The other issue is, of course, nuclear. We are building an additional nuclear station, but whether or not you think that's green, I'll leave it up to you. The other runner coming up on the inside rail is, of course, green hydrogen. That's a separate kind of topic in its own, but it is actually there, and Truss does actually want to, I think, double capacity at the last thing that I saw. However, what we do need to realise is that our energy bills won't be getting intrinsically cheaper for several more years because of their close link to international energy prices, and we can't do anything about those. You might have heard all these things, let's nationalise it, let's set a great British energy company up. Great, you can nationalise all the energy companies, but you can't nationalise the energy free market. So to untangle that lot is well above my pay grade, and probably most of ours are on this call. And of course, the other thing to realise from her energy strategy is the Ofgem price cap has not vanished. It's just disappeared behind the scenes, and it will simply set how big UK tax bills are going to be to pay for all this energy. So in conclusion, Truss's energy price guarantee solves nothing fundamental. All she's done is use government money to sit between her desired price level, which is politically acceptable, and the Ofgem price cap, whatever that is going to be. However, her actual strategy for energy self-sufficiency should work in the long term. I am cautiously optimistic, and I can explain why I put in the Q&A. So as I was saying, international gas prices remain elevated relative to their long-term averages, and that will hold us hostage. Domestic energy prices look stable for the next 2 years because of the EPG, but goodness knows where they're going to go after. And of course, there is a potentially vast cost to the taxpayer. Business prices will probably remain stable going through winter of 2023. The impact of energy supply side reforms on bills are too far away to have a short-term kind of impact. There is going to be a 6-month review for businesses to identify the vulnerable sectors. So really, any business person on this call, you need to decide if you're in a vulnerable sector and need to lobby as hard as you possibly can through whatever trade association you belong to. The removal of green levies and the introduction of fracking is complete nonsense, both economically and environmentally. That's probably a political point. I can discuss that later. So all I can do to suggest to you now is, looking at the trends of energy prices and whatever, is you take a long, hard, cold look at your energy consumption and reduce it wherever possible. Join in with community energy, lobby for your rights as a business. Well, whatever happens, we have to take our energy destiny into our own hands, because Liz Truss and the government certainly isn't going to on our behalf. So that's me done. Thank you very much. I don't know if I've overrun or underrun, but I don't know, are we taking questions at the end?
We'll do questions at the end, I think, but that was absolutely perfect time and a brilliant set of slides. And I thought that was very clear and very helpful. We've got about 3 questions, but we'll try to come back to those towards the end. And if you have a look in the chat box, you might be able to pick some of those up as we go along.
Right, okay, thanks for that. If I stop sharing.
Yes, please. Also, if I can apologise if people have been having problems getting in, it seems there was a bit of an issue with the link being quite hard to find in Eventbrite, but I think we've been firefighting that quite well behind the scenes. So, welcome everybody, and I hope you enjoy it. If there's any thing you've missed, then the recording will be available later. Thank you, Mark. That was fantastic.
I think if we press on, so we allow as much time as possible for Q&As at the end, around about 11ish, perhaps just after then. And could we have Robert Meadows now, who's going to talk about the electricity bills, show his slides. Thank you.
So yes, of course, I will share my screen now. Can everyone
Power for the people? Thank you.
Yes, is that working? Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, nice to meet you all. I definitely recognize some names here, and it's lovely to be in this forum with you all. And thank you, Mark. That was a really interesting presentation. My name is Rupert Meadows. I work at Power for People. I'll give you a very, very quick introduction to us, because I'm sure at least some of the people in the call are familiar with what we do.
Sorry to interrupt, Rupert. I think quite a few people can't actually see your presentation.
Can't see my presentation. Let's
try and
see.
reshare, perhaps.
Okay, how is that?
Yeah, there we go.
Right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize, thank you. Right, so Power for People, we are a campaigning organization, and we have 2 core aims. The core aims are, 1, to accelerate the transition to 100% renewable energy in the UK, and 2, to ensure that local communities benefit from that transition, local people themselves. As Mark mentioned at the end there, this is kind of a more future facing thing as opposed to something that's directly relevant to our energy bills at the moment. What we're campaigning for is changes to the law that will hopefully have a really positive impact on the future. So I want to start with just a quick macro look at the community energy sector. The number on the left is slightly out of date. I believe it's now 331 megawatts, but that's what we have at the moment across the UK, which is less than 0.5% of the UK's electricity generating capacity. In 2014, the government said that we could have 3,000 megawatts by 2020. So it's clear to see that the potential for this sector, according to the government themselves, has not quite been realised. And I'm just going to move. Sorry, I'm just going to move the presentation people to the side so I can see my notes. So the middle bar is really represents the potential that's been lost in the last 8 years that we could have been having now, enjoying now, but we don't yet. And the bar on the right, the green bar, is based on an inquiry last year by the Parliamentary Environmental Audit Committee and a research paper by WPI Economics, and shows what community energy could grow to by 2030. So a nearly 20-fold increase on what we have now. But again, the caveat for this, as was the caveat for the government's estimation in 2014, is that we need the right policy support in place. 20-fold increase would make community energy 10% of the UK's entire electricity generation, and I will move through. What that would mean is that we want to get to a point where we can see communities like this one in Germany. This is Wildpolsried. I'm sure I've butchered that pronunciation, but it is a small town in Germany that generates more than 3 times the energy it uses, all of it renewable. And the reason that they've been able to do that is because in Germany they have local supply rights. Communities are able to enter into the supply market, build their own generation, distribute it, sell it locally, and have a stake in the way they power their homes and businesses, not just by owning it, by being part of the way it's distributed and having ownership over the way the benefits of that distribution are kind of settled amongst themselves, distributed locally. So what we're campaigning for is really to empower community energy schemes to be able to sell the energy that they generate directly to local customers. So in order to do this, we drafted a piece of legislation called the Local Electricity Bill. It's been in a few different parliamentary sessions, so it's been active in Parliament for a few years now, and it's in Parliament as a private member's bill. And what that means is it's a bill which can be introduced by an MP who is not a member of government, and it is a really effective way of having legislation put in that you can then use as a platform to build support around. So you put a bill into Parliament through a member of Parliament who is not government, and then you rally support around that. And for the last few years, we've been building support around this principle of enabling local supply. And as of last year, in the 2021-2022 session, it was a presentation bill introduced by an MP called David Johnston, who is from Wantage. And there has been a new parliamentary session which started in May, so we will be now intending to have David Johnston again reintroduce an updated local electricity bill once Parliament returns from recess next week. And I say updated because when you start a campaign like this, you really need to start with a principle. So that's why I talked about kind of enabling local supply, empowering local supply. And you build support around that core principle. And when you get to the point where you have enough support for your campaign, you can then draw in the really key experts that need to be put around the table, and you can engage with government and you can say, we need to get this over the line, let's get this done. And that is the point that we are approaching now. We've got 311 MPs on board so far. We've managed to do that by really just asking people who support our campaign to write to their MPs, asking them to add their names to the bill, attend debates, speak in favour of it, all of these good things. And that 311 MPs is 120 Conservatives and 120 Labour, and many other different of the smaller parties. We've got the backing of the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, and the Shadow Energy Minister, Alan Whitehead, which kind of effectively gives us Labour party backing. It's also Liberal Democrat and Green Party policy. 43 out of the 45 Scottish National Party MPs now support this campaign, and the SNP spokesperson confirmed at an energy security debate in Parliament on the 5th of July that they support it. So they, as a party, effectively support it. And all 3 Plaid Cymru MPs support the bill as well. And I mentioned just briefly earlier that we're starting to build out the technical wording of it, and we have been doing that this year in collaboration with several key energy experts. This all came about from following a debate we had in Parliament. The Energy Minister, Greg Hands, the then Energy Minister, agreed to meet with us and his BEIS officials to discuss the bill, which is a really significant step for the campaign. And it was a constructive discussion. And the result was that the minister instructed his officials to work with us on finding agreement on kind of how what the bill calls for can be implemented. So that was in January and February. We then met again alongside Nigel Cornwall, who I'm sure many of you will know is founder of Cornwall Insights and was former a member of the Department for Energy and Climate Change. And the officials basically said that, as it is drafted, because it is light on detail, we're concerned that it could create undesired consequences, etc. And so we have then spent the time since then working with Nigel Cornwall, Dr. Jeff Hardy, who's the former head of Sustainable Energy Futures at Ofgem, and Merlin Hyman, who's the chief executive of Regen, along with a lot of consultation in industry. And we have published our joint thinking in the policy discussion paper, which I'll happily share with everyone in the chat at the end of my presentation. And in this discussion paper, we put forward kind of an improvement, a more detailed understanding of what the local electricity bill is that we will then be having reintroduced into the new parliamentary session. So we've turned these two proposals into legislative text in the form of two amendments to the government's energy bill, which still is active, but might well fall through, and we'll come to that later. But the two are a community electricity export guarantee, which establishes a right for sites that generate low carbon electricity with capacity below 5 megawatts to export their electricity to an existing electricity supplier on fair terms. And the second one is a community electricity supplier services scheme, which places a requirement on existing larger suppliers to work with community schemes to sell the power they generate to local customers. So existing suppliers can charge a fee for doing this, but that fee must be reasonable. And the intention for this is to effectively establish a fair price that community energy organizations can get for their energy for a fixed rate of time, and also find a way for them to be able to have a more direct relationship with the people that are buying their energy locally. So the government's energy bill, this is what we were trying to amend. It was announced, I think, at some point in perhaps June or July, and it was the first substantial piece of proposed energy legislation in almost 10 years. We had to react to this turn of events quickly, as normal legislation is first introduced into the House of Commons, but this was introduced into the House of Lords, as any bill can be. And we were able to successfully get 4 cross-party peers to put down the amendments that I've just outlined at the beginning of September. And that was a really effective way. We got, I think it was by a Green Party peer, a couple of crossbench peers, and a Liberal Democrat peer. Oh, and one Labour peer as well, which is very encouraging and important in any legislative campaign. So the disappointing thing is that while these amendments were waiting to be debated, the change of Prime Minister and the death of the Queen meant that Parliament's progress has ground to a halt. The energy bill is now on hold and will likely be scrapped. However, the government will, it won't be replaced by nothing. The government will soon introduce, as far as we can tell, new emergency energy legislation once the party conferences are concluded and Parliament returns on the 11th of October. And what this presents is a new pathway for us. So we plan to organise new amendments to this emergency energy legislation. So get those amendments that I outlined earlier into any new legislation that would deliver what we're calling for. The government might try and block this, so it's really important in the coming months that we show them the strength of support there is for this campaign. So at the moment, what we're asking people to do is please write to their MPs, asking them to write to the new Secretary of State for BEIS, Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg, asking that the government include these measures to support the growth of community energy in any upcoming emergency energy legislation. So please, if there's something that you take away and go and do on my side of things, please do that. That would be extremely helpful. Campaigns like these have been extremely successful in the past. So I've got 2 campaigns highlighted here. The one on the right, the Climate Change Act 2008, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, which led to the UK closing almost all of its coal power stations and construction of the largest offshore wind farms in the world, and set the targets, that the carbon emissions targets that the government is now legally required to attain. And on the left, the Household Waste Recycling Act in 2003, which set up all of the doorstep recycling collection that we have nowadays. These were both campaigns won through this method of campaigning, of building out a broad network of support amongst individuals, local organisations, national organisations, councils, etc., and asking them all to write to their MPs. We've now got over 1,000 local organisations and councils behind this, which is really encouraging. Over 100 local authorities, so those bigger principal councils, 311 MPs, as I mentioned, and we've also got a coalition of 85 national organisations, including 4 of the 6 distribution network operators, and then Community Energy England, Community Energy Scotland, Community Energy Wales, the British Hydropower Association, Solar Energy UK, Renewable Energy Association, all of the names in the industry that you would imagine are there, and then big names like Greenpeace and WWF and RSPB as well. So we're looking, we're in a promising position, but nothing has been won yet. So with your help and the help of more people like you, we can win this campaign and empower local communities across the UK to be able to buy and sell their own renewable energy, and hopefully unlock much more of all of the wonderful work that all of the people on this call already do, just make that easier for them. So please do sign the petition, sign up to our newsletter for updates on our progress. We'll keep you updated with any actions to take. And thank you very much. Together we can get much more of this wonderful community-led renewable energy. Thank you.
Rupert, thank you very much for that. That was very interesting. And basically, I think you're saying write to your MPs.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned somewhere in there that it's good to write to your MP. Yeah, exactly. It really is effective.
Timing was really good for that. And I'm just going to press on to allow as much time as possible for the Q&As, because it would be quite interesting to see now Amy Carnley-Parry from Energy Local, and this sort of, which is another piece of the jigsaw about being able to sort of sell electricity directly to local people. If she could come and show her slides now. Thank you.
Everyone, thanks for having me. Let me just put this onto a slideshow. Oh, that's the wrong bit, isn't it? So I'm from Energy Local. We are one of the pieces in the jigsaw puzzle, as Chris has said, for taking energy destiny into your own hands, as Mark very well put. I'll put this on here. I came into Energy Local earlier this year as community engagement executive. My background is in community wealth building, small business development, and before that, psychology. So I'm not from an energy background. So if anyone has any technical questions, please do fire them at me, but I'm not going to try and wing anything that I don't know. So I'll get back to you if there's anything that I don't know immediately. So I'm just going to go through what Energy Local is, what we do, and how to set up Energy Local clubs. So we're a social enterprise transforming the electricity market for local communities and small-scale renewable generation. We're doing that by linking communities to the local renewables. They could be privately owned, community owned, could be businesses. So the generators can get a fairer price for their energy and the communities can pay less, fairer price. So we want to support the establishment of thousands of local, not-for-profit Energy Local clubs. At the moment, we have 10, we've got about 15 in the pipeline and lots more interest. Obviously, it's picking up even more at the moment because it's critical. Just a bit on our background. I think a lot of you probably will know or heard of Mary Gilly. She is an engineer, physicist by training, an engineer by occupation. and she found this way through complex sites of setting up this fairer system of energy markets. Complex sites are designed for things like nuclear power stations and airports, and she found a way to use the legislation around that to create these markets. This is just a little map of where we are at the moment. As you can see, we're very Wales heavy, so we're working on expanding throughout the UK. Okay, Energy Local in a nutshell. The households and generators come together to form an Energy Local co-op. It's an independent co-op, so we facilitate the creation of it and we support all the way through. But it is actually an independent co-op, and we encourage the co-ops to run themselves. Every household in the co-op has to have a smart meter installed so that they can show how much power they're using and when they're using it as it's generated locally by the generator. The members, who are the households and the generator is also director, agree a price which we call the match tariff, and that's paid to the generator when the consumers are matching their energy use. So when the energy is being generated and it's been consumed at the same price, they agree a fair match price, and there's no margin on that price. So whatever the consumers pay is what the generator gets. We partner with 2 energy suppliers at the moment, Octopus Energy and Green Energy UK, and they sell any extra power that's needed by the households through a higher tariff, and every generator agrees a power purchase agreement with the same supplier as the club is on. The match price, this is a very basic idea, but this is how it works, is higher than the power purchase agreement, which is what the generator will pay, will be paid by the supplier for their surplus energy, and lower than the club's domestic tariff, which is given by the generator, which we also call time of use tariff, which varies at different times of the day. Sorry, I've got a poorly 5-year-old here, so excuse me if I get interrupted. So the key ingredients is, it's a very simple idea, and the genius of it is in its simplicity, really. All club members must be in the same primary substation network. It's worked off the 11 kilovolt lines that the generator is on. So the generator is connected to a substation, and all of the network from that substation identifies who can be in the club. We draw up a map for the clubs, and anyone within that club, depending on what the provisos for the specific club is, can join. There's 2 options for deciding the match price. You can either agree a flat rate, which is often used when the club maybe deals with a lot of vulnerable households. It's a bit simpler for people to understand and to use. So in this case, the match price would have to always be lower than the tariff given by the supplier. So in this one, I think the match rate is, can't see what match rate is. I missed that. Anyway, sorry. Right. So that is the simplest way of working it out. So whenever the community or whatever household is using energy as it's being produced, they'll pay the blue line price, 9p. But when there isn't any local energy available, they'll be paying 15p during the day, 23p in the evening, or 10p overnight. Most clubs opt for a variable match tariff. Generally, it can help them to save a bit more. It takes energy usage away from the evening peak times, 4 to 8 p.m. So it's still cheaper to use your energy at other parts of the day, but you can still save money if there's local generation available at that time. So the match tariff overnight is 7.5p, during the day 13.5p, and at peak time 16.5p. I think we all know what smart meters are. They record the electricity import every half hour, and at the same time as having smart meters put in, or if they've already got smart meters, we have CADs put in, which are consumer access devices, and they help to feed back what's being used into our dashboard, so which I'll show you later, so people can log into the dashboard, see what's available, see what they're using, and try and use their electricity efficiently. This is what the dashboard looks like for the generator. As you can see, the higher, the blue, it's a bit annoying that it's actually the same color, but the higher blue bits are what's available, the peak bits, and then what's being used is the lower bit. So you can see on this part between the estimate and the forecast. So that would be today if it was live. You can see that there was a lot more available than was being used. So you could log in, see it's available, go and turn your dishwasher and your tumble dryer on, so they can see what's being used. It's forecast using weather data. So it's hard, it can be difficult to forecast if it's kind of wind power, but solar is much easier to forecast. There's also individual household dashboards that people can log into, so they can get a much more detailed idea of what they've used, what's available, how much they're saving. So the aim is to encourage people to use their energy efficiently and use it when it's available locally. This is a very simplified graph of how it all works. So generally a local organisation will come to us. They'll pay us a setup fee, which is dependent on how much support they need, what type of club it is, if it's private or community based. Then we train up an advisor, and the advisor takes the organisation and the community through the whole process. So all the marketing, all the portal training, which is where people switch their energy supplier and things, the dashboard training, the setting up the AGM, so all of that, all the resources, all the constitution, we give them everything they need, and they're the ones that are locally based. So, you know, if someone's setting up a club in, I don't know, Devon, and we're in Wales and Lancashire, we don't know who the best groups are to speak to, or where people hang out at the weekend, or the popular market. So the advisor is there to really kind of get it ingrained in the community and explain what it all is. That support is really ongoing. The idea is the advisor steps out and the directors take over. But Energy Local kind of HQ is always there to support when necessary. There's a small annual fee from the householders to Energy Local, which at the moment is just £1 a year. And the generators pay a nominal amount as well. The roles and responsibilities, Energy Local CIC, as I said, we facilitate the creation of the co-ops. Our aim isn't to be involved in every co-op. We want the co-ops in the long run to support each other and support other local co-ops to set up, so we can step out and just be the help and, you know, market the whole idea, PR, and promoting and developing it in general. The advisor job is to recruit the members from the community. Sometimes that can be really easy, really quick, depends on the type of community and their contacts. Other times it can be quite hard sell because people can't believe that they could be saving money and the generator could be making more money, and they just don't trust it. So some people just completely shut down. So their job then is to go out to the community and help them. And also a lot of people have, particularly in vulnerable communities, they have lots of other stressors. And this isn't something, even though it will help them, sometimes isn't something they can really set any time aside to. So it's the advisor's responsibility to get out there and, you know, build the trust factor as well. The advisor helps to agree the match price between the generator and the community. We facilitate that with a model where we can work out the optimal amount of houses based on live data, real data when we have it, and otherwise we can use estimates. And then the supplier does all of the billing, because nobody wants to be involved in debt collecting from their neighbours. So the supplier is in charge of all the billing, metering, ensuring they have all the data from the smart meters and the CADs, and then obviously all of the licensing that they're normally responsible for. Oh, sorry, just stopped my video. Financing, generally we're getting involved after the generation is in place. And so there could, for example, be a farmer who's got a wind turbine and hears of us and realizes that he can support his local community or her local community and make some more money. So they might get in touch after them, or a community hydro thinks that they'll be able to get more money by setting up an Energy Local club and supporting their local community. So the generation side of it we're not generally involved in setting that up, but I know that people do share offers quite a lot of them privately owned. We have one lady who has got a solar array, and that's her retirement fund. So she set up an Energy Local club to increase that. And grants. I don't know how many grants are available at the moment. I'm sure lots of other people have better insight into that. So in the club development ranges from £5,500 for all of the training, resources, dashboard setup, portal that I explained earlier. Depends on type of club, if it needs a lot of support, if it's a private estate, so we've got an estate that wants to become entirely sustainable and we're doing a lot more of the management, so the costs are a bit higher. We try and keep the costs as low as possible for community groups. Usually those are grant funded, they can be privately funded, can be paid for by the council, and the advisor on top of the training costs is often paid, so it might be paid for an organisation. One of them, my colleagues, started with Energy Local through being an advisor, and she was paid through the council as part of her position. It's good if they can be paid, I think, because it's an important role, but also similarly we do have quite a lot of volunteers as well. And that's it. Those are my contact details. We're on Twitter and LinkedIn under Energy Local, and if anyone wants to email or is interested in setting up a club, we do a lot of expression of interest meetings. We do 2 a month on different days, so you can come and find out more and see if there's any clubs in your area or anyone you could work with to set one up.
Amy, thank you very much for that. I'm just going to wait for your screen to go away so we can see everyone. I've noted down some questions here quickly as we've been going along. Might need some help from Jessie and Kelly, but going back to Mark Earthy, I had a question from Damien at Brighton Energy Co-op, who was asking about sort of price predictions for the next 3 years. I suppose for community energy groups, it would be really helpful to have any insight into what PPAs might be in about 3 years' time. I don't know if you could give a bit of advice to community energy groups on that, Mark. It might not be easy, but what do you think is going to happen? And you said that you were optimistic in the long term as well, and how that might relate to a future PPAs. You're waving at me. Oh, you're on mute, Mark.
Right. It's not letting me unmute you.
Ooh, perhaps I'll just...
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, can you go past the elements of that question again? So because I only heard part of it. It was 3-year trends?
Yes, because for community energy groups at the moment, prices are high for PPAs, which is great for our projects. Yeah. But any idea of what you think might happen in about 3 years' time? And you sort of mentioned you were optimistic in the long term. What do you think is going to happen with prices?
Right. Well, at the moment, the gas price curve, I think, is fairly low for the immediate winter because most people actually got the gas they need. So demand is falling off. It starts going up again, I think, next year, and then starts gently falling through the next 5 to 6 years. But even so, even at its lowest point, it's still at least double what it was this time last year. So the gas price doesn't look like it's going to come anywhere down, in the near future. Then, of course, you've got the Ukraine-Russian thing, which is kind of twitching and turning at every moment. And then the other complexity you've also got is that OPEC is now threatening to reduce oil price production, which means oil prices rise. It also means all wholesale gas contracts that are indexed to the price of crude oil will also start rising. So the whole thing is going again. So the simple answer to your question is the PPA prices are probably going to remain elevated above their original levels quite some time, which is really, really good for community energy. So I'd kind of push ahead. The other thing I've said in other articles and talks that I've given is that the longer that these fossil fuel prices remain high, the more we get an economy of scale for renewables, because we're incentivized to do more renewables, which means there's more demand for the technology, which means the price should start falling. So and then you get kind of economies of scales. Yeah, one of the other, I don't know if that answers the question, but just moving on to the thing about Liz Truss and being optimistic. I'm only optimistic in the sense that because she's chasing all opportunities simultaneously, at least one of them should actually succeed. So, I mean, there are, talks like this, groups like our, the kind of community energy schemes all being motivated by what she's doing or not doing. So I think it is actually going to be sorted out at grassroots level. It's groups like this one and all over the country that's probably going to actually make the difference. So that's where I'm optimistic. I'm not optimistic at all about building more nuclear or to a certain extent green hydrogen. I just think that will just fall out of the woodwork. Sorry, does that answer the question?
Yes, Mark, thank you. And actually there was a question that you raised for Rupert, and that was around the balancing and settlement code and your concern about the energy bill there. Perhaps you could expand on that for Rupert.
Yeah, the trouble is with the archaic balancing and settlement code that we have is that all market participants need to nominate in advance what their physical intentions are and deliver against them. So if you imagine your supplier buys enough energy for what it thinks it needs, so it enters into a contract with a generator and then away it goes. What the balancing settlements code does, it looks at the actual metered consumption of the supplier against what it actually bought. And if there's a difference, it sends them the bill, which when you're running fossil fuel generation actually makes a lot of sense. If the supplier is relying on a renewable source to make its demand, and that renewable source can't run, like the wind stops blowing or the sun goes in or something happens, right? Who is responsible for supplying the units of energy that renewable scheme has defaulted on, right? Well, the answer is the supplier does, because the supplier is responsible for meeting its own demand. So the National Grid will promptly send the supplier a very large bill having to meet their missing generation from, God help us, nuclear or gas or whatever. And energy imbalance prices can be very high. So unless we can find a mechanism that we're insulated from the BSC, or as I'm doing, campaigning to get the BSC changed, which is why I'm interested in talking about this further, I just see problems. Sorry, it's just issues for me.
Rupert, I wonder.
Happy for me to, Sorry, Chris, thank you. So Mark, firstly, thank you very much. I'd be really interested to hear any kind of more detailed concerns. Please do send them over. I'll put my email address in the chat, and I'd be really interested to have a conversation with you about all those things. To speak about it briefly, and I hope that I cover your concerns. I believe this kind of matter is something that has been covered by the more detailed wording of the current bill. So before it was just about, we need to enable local supply, and now we've set up a system. The two amendments that we have would effectively put a legal obligation on a current national supplier of a certain size, so anything above 500,000 customers, to partner willingly with local projects, and the local project would effectively be selling through that national license. And that does two things. One, it helps with all of these balancing codes, which would fall onto the supply license itself of the national supplier. And the second is they would enter into kind of the fair terms of agreement, which would not only be about supply of buying the energy for a fair price, but would also be about those customers that local project would have locally being supported as and when they were not generating, and there was a difference between generation and consumption.
So I just sent a question around. I just wondered if you're represented on the REMA, the review of UK energy markets, because they're trying to tackle all this Ofgem, BEIS and Elexon. So
not at the moment, but it's something to think about. Absolutely.
So I don't want to turn into privatism, but I just want to add this. I'm desperately trying to get on that committee through fair means or foul. So we will exchange emails, I think, and discussion afterwards. Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you. I did see a couple of questions for Amy about Energy Local, about, let me just 1 second. One of those was from Zach, about the match of solar to Energy Local and actually time of use when people are using their energy. And Mark, you also raised a question about the use of battery storage. Amy, is there something you'd like to say about that?
Yes, so I'm just finding the question. So from Zach, is it does Energy Local work that well with solar? A few domestic customers want cheap electricity during the day. Okay, so it does. We've got a few solar generators. Things have changed a bit. Obviously, a lot of people work from home now, so actually it's not quite the same profile as it would have used to be. So yeah, it depends on the community. It does work well with solar, but also probably would work well with solar if you also had a hydro scheme in there. When we do the modelling, we do it based on the profile throughout the year. So you may find that there's a lot of surplus solar in the middle of the summer, just to even out people's bills and savings throughout the year, because we work on the basis that it saves between 10 to 20% for the customers and benefits the generator by the same 10 to 20%. So everybody's winning. So it does still work, but we just have to be careful not to have, not to get overexcited because there's so much generation in the summer, put loads of people on it, and then actually through the course of the year, no one's saving money. So that's what the modeling's for, to work that out. With Octopus, they only allow for one generator. With Green Energy UK, they do allow for more than one. The tariffs for Green Energy UK are much higher. So when people aren't getting the local power, they'll be paying more through the time of use tariff. So in those cases, we're just starting with Green Energy UK, but when that happens, we'll just have to ensure that there's plenty of local power available. And second question, can multiple generators can be combined? We're working on that with Octopus at the moment, no, but we're hoping that will change. It's not a no forever. We're just working out how to kind of move that forwards with them. Green Energy UK, as I just said, you can have multiple generators. So we could have one main generator, which we need at least one with a 3-phase import-export meter, and then even household solar can be added into the club. So yes, multiple generators can be combined. It just depends which supplier we use. So I move to the next one. Does Energy Local work with battery storage? We don't at the moment, but we can do, and we're hoping to soon. There just aren't any clubs at the moment that are using battery storage, but it's a really good idea. And I've spoken to some people recently who are planning on including battery storage with their generation. So yeah, obviously that would be really good with solar because we can export it overnight as well.
Could I ask Amy about, you're working with Octopus and Green Energy UK.
Yeah.
Do you want to see this rolled out across the UK? And what's your sort of capacity? Sorry about the sirens. To make it sort of grow this, and what you need from the community energy sector to help you?
Yes, they do want to see it rolled out. It will benefit them because firstly, they get more customers, and also it helps with the settlement process for them to move people away from peak time consumption, saves them money, because I think as Mark was saying, they can get fines for having the wrong amount and not having their settlements balanced. So yes, they do want us to. They'll actually do better the more people we have. And what do we need? I think largely we need to get the word out there. So any community energy groups to kind of bear it in mind for any relevant projects going on. I think we need to do a lot of marketing and PR in-house because we're still not that well known. And as I was saying, there is an issue with the trust when people in the community don't know who we are. So yeah, that's it largely. Kind of keep us in mind when you're working on other projects that this is one of the options for community energy. Next question. Sorry, did that answer the question?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Is there another question you've seen there that you want to pick up on?
Could this work for a group of retirement homes, each with their own meter? I'm not sure what you mean. So the group of retirement homes as the consumers, is that?
I asked that question actually because Avesco's looking at a project with a private retirement home.
Yeah.
And they'd like to have ground-mounted solar there, but at the moment we can't sell that electricity direct to those individuals in those blocks of flats.
Yes.
And so Energy Local seemed like a solution to that. But so maybe that's a conversation Avesco should have with you. And
Yes.
also we're working on a project called Community Power, or we hope to be in the future. And again, we'd like to speak to Energy Local about that project.
Yeah, certainly. We work with a housing association in Brixton, and they've got solar on their roof. which benefits all of the tenants below. So yes, absolutely, that's possible. I think I saw another one lower down, did I?
We've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So I don't know if Kelly's got any other questions as well that have popped up. Probably quite.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions.
questions.
Yeah, yes, thank you everyone. Great presentation, thank you. I've got a couple of questions from Susie Kershaw. She asked one of Rupert Meadows and a couple for Amy. Susie, would you like to unmute yourself and ask? Otherwise I can quickly do it for you.
Could you do it for me? Could you do it for me?
Kelly, you're on mute still.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find them. Okay, so your first question to Rupert was, is there any people from Germany available to support UK efforts in this? And then,
So so we do one at a time. Germany, people in Germany to support efforts. I actually don't know off the top of my head. We haven't reached out to anyone in Germany. I think it's always a little bit of a kind of treading lightly when you want to talk about kind of different solutions in different countries, because there's a very strong counter to any kind of thing like that if you're trying to talk about it to politicians, which is just that, you know, they have a different country, they have a different population, they have a different system. What works for them might not work for us. So really, it's more just to show that these things are able to be built, and we can build them if we change the rules and regulations around how our energy markets are set up. But it's a really good suggestion, and I might well look into that. Thank you. Yeah, we haven't even thought to kind of reach out to people in Germany and engage with them. So thanks.
I just thought that you could get the technical advice, and there might even be some sort of, what shall I say, template that they've got already, which takes, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say is that we're not a generation project at all. We are a campaigning organization. We're really just trying to represent the voices of the sector and make sure that their needs are met at a legislative level. So I think that's absolutely something that comes later as well, when we can hopefully kind of blow the system open with new legislation and allow for these kind of projects to be built all over the UK. You know, the upscaling of that will yeah, I could see that being very beneficial.
great, thanks. And Susie also asked of Amy, any advice? Oh no, that's the wrong one, sorry. What happens if overnight demand is restricted for some reason after we have all gone to bed, leaving car plugged in? For Amy.
Sorry, if the overnight demand is?
What happens if the overnight demand is restricted for some reason after we've all gone to bed?
The supply, you mean, is restricted?
It's a question from Susie, so she wants to expand.
Susie, sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean by if the demand is right, okay. So it's just fulfilled by the supplier. So you've got that time of use tariff. If you're with a solar club, for example, then there won't be any solar available at a match price overnight. So that's just fulfilled by the supplier at their time of use tariff overnight, which is generally lower than the daytime anyway. So it won't just cut off when there's not any local power available. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, good. So go to this other one from Laura about how long is a typical PPA?
Yeah, and then I'll just have a quick question for Mark as well after that.
Okay, typical PPA, we're not really involved in the PPAs. We encourage the generators to just agree that between themselves and the supplier, so they can get their best rate, and then we help them to work out a match price from that. So it's whatever they want. If they get offered a really high price short term, they might agree that. We prefer it if they agree a year, because then we're not changing the match price more than once in the year. And the householders aren't tied into the club at all. There's no penalty if they decide to leave for whatever reason. If they move house or get offered an amazing offer somewhere else, then they can just leave.
Thanks, Amy. There's a question from Mark from Luciana, which is, could you please expand on the point of the UK becoming an energy exporter by 2040, please?
Yeah, I think it's one of Liz Truss's, which may be a fantasy. I think she wants to build so much renewables and things, and we kind of return to the days of the, you know, as I said in my graph, yesteryear, where we can just actually export back to Europe or even Norway, you know, when the prices and volumes are right. So that's her intent. Whether she'll do it by 2040, I have no idea. I don't think she will, but that's what she's aiming for. And I don't mind if we have far too much renewable capacity. As long as we've got enough batteries, I'm happy.
Right, I'm just going to go to a quick question from Ian Davies to Rupert, which is Power to People website advises that 77 local authorities support the bill. Is there a list of these?
Yes, thank you. I actually sent it to him in a private message. But if you go onto our website, the support page, which I'll put into the chat now. If you scroll down several ways, sorry, it's putting all the support on one page is it's a good problem to have, but you have to scroll down quite far. You can get to supportive county councils and local authorities, and I believe we currently have 100 listed here. So we're missing the latest 3, and we'll put those on ASAP.
And there's another quick question for you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Well, yeah. Sorry, please.
Who was that who asked? Just so I can't see. Yes,
Ian
please.
Davis. I
Ian.
wanted to ask a question of Rupert. Having worked for Southampton City Council for 16 years and with Dr. Alan Whitehead, he was instrumental in supporting this bill. There's an association of public sector excellence that the local authorities buy from, get support from on energy, and local authorities, their budgets have been cut since 2010. And if you're going to have a funding stream for local authorities, I would have thought that would be an avenue that you could look to try and get more support from, to get to all local authorities to support this excellent bill.
Yeah, brilliant suggestion. I think that's a really good idea. We haven't got in contact with apps yet, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Kelly, can you see any more questions?
Well, we've got over 30 questions, probably about 40 questions. So, you know,
I think we'll have to. Yeah, I think we'll have to put them together, Kelly. You and I between us, and we'll.
Could I just answer this one from Nick Rouse, which I should have included in the presentation? So if I could just answer that quickly, I think it might be quite helpful. Is that okay? So it says the energy local clubs are said to require all members to be on the same 11 kV substation. So all people on that substation have to be members of the club. No, they don't. They just, to be members of the club, they have to be within that network. And it says, does all local generation have to be connected at low voltage from the substation? Yes, at the moment, the load has to be connected at the same voltage as the generation. So if the generator wants to not feed into, you know, it wants to be in a club that's working with households, then it would have to be at low voltage. It can connect at 11 kV if the load is 11 kV. So if it was a factory or something, some other load that is also connected at 11 kV.
Thank you. We've got literally a couple of minutes left. Is there, Kelly or Chris, have you seen any questions that are really pressing, or does anyone want to pipe up with a question that they really like answered right now?
Can see one, Dr. Mark Earthy's asking Amy, does Energy Local support peer-to-peer trading, cutting out the middleman?
It's sort of peer-to-peer trading, isn't it? It's cutting out the cost of the line loss factors and DNO and other supplier costs on the match price. So we're removing the margin there. I'm not sure I can answer that question in much detail. What sort of peer-to-peer trading are you thinking?
Yeah, sorry, am I on mute? Or can people hear me? Right? Yeah. Yeah, so I know it was short of time. No, I just a couple of weeks ago I was introduced to the Belgian version of what you're doing, and it was
Alright.
beautiful in its simplicity. Much easier than the contortions and complexity that you and Rupert are going through. That's not a criticism, it's an observation. So basically what happens in the Belgian grid is that people nominate themselves as a community energy scheme, and they all agree between themselves what price they want to sell their solar to each other at. And then at the end of the exercise, the local distributor, which means supplier in English terms, steps in to actually make up the difference. So there is no, you don't have to sell the power to the supplier and buy it back again. Everybody trades amongst themselves, and the local electricity company just simply sorts out the residual. And it's so much easier than this dreadful UK system.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good on you.
I support that definitely. But at the moment, it's just not possible to be that simple. But yeah, definitely would support that if it was possible.
Tom Broughton's got his hand up, and I think that will probably be the last question for the session, but we'll pull all of the questions together into a Q&A and send it round to all the participants afterwards. So if you feel like your question hasn't been answered, hopefully we'll still be able to answer it. There's been a lot of questions on this session. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, it's a question for Mark. The renewable energy generators are not getting the wholesale price of electricity they export. They're getting their PPA or feed-in tariff. So where is the difference going? Money, you know, where's that money going if the wholesale price isn't the same as what they're getting?
It's generally going to the suppliers as kind of insurance premium against non-delivery. As I said earlier on, the balancing and settlements code is very nasty to intermittents, in the sense that the supplier contracts with you and you fail to deliver, the supplier has to make good the volume that you haven't delivered. And if they haven't made provision for it, the National Grid will sort them out and send them a nice big bill in the imbalance mechanism. So that's the simplest answer I can come up with. But that is not free. That is a very costly exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hence my question on peer-to-peer trading. Sorry.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, the speakers, for your fabulous presentations. You can save the chat box if you want to by clicking on the little 3 dots in the message box and save the chat, and we will sort out questions and answers for you if anyone hasn't had their question answered. But thank you, everybody, for coming, and I do apologise again if you had problems joining. I hope we didn't miss too many people out.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say, yeah, huge thank you to the 3 speakers. That was a really interesting subject, and no doubt we'd like to revisit this again in the future, especially if the energy bill is passed. So I think we'll close now, and then Jessie, if you can pick those questions up, as you said, and hopefully the speakers can answer those for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I will
Happy to
send you all stuff around later. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.